Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Unger Real Estate Group, brokered by eXp Realty, proudly serving Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties. Call 407-790-9957 or visit WeSellOrlando.net. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you here on, it's mid-September, and of course that means that the tropics are affecting football again. This is your meteorology edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Gentlemen, I would like to inform you that I have not yet received my American Meteorological Society seal yet, and so everything that I tell you is something that someone else has reported, unfortunately. But neither of you, Jim Cantori has not made any guest appearances in your backyards, has he?
No, but I dream about it at night.
That's why I let Murph go. I knew Murph was ready. Murph is probably the biggest. No one's more disappointed than Murph, probably. Not necessarily that the game is canceled, but the fact that he's not, that nobody's traveling to this event.
Yeah, I think
you're still going, aren't you?
Right. I think it's something I want to clear up, guys. I know the game's been canceled. I'm still going to North Carolina.
You're still going to Chapel Hill. The entire town's on lockdown, but you're still
right. No, there's a street somewhere. I'm gonna hang on to a lamppost. Everything's gonna be cool.
Bungee cord yourself to a stop sign somewhere in the middle of downtown Chapel Hill and let the
good
chips
thing
fall
is I have a low center of gravity, so it's really hard for wind to take me places.
So we'll talk about UCF and North Carolina getting canceled, as you probably would imagine by now. We also have a guest on the show, Jenny Frank, longtime UCF volleyball great, stops by the show to talk about UCF volleyball then and UCF volleyball now. And Eric and I get into a debate about what the UNC cancellation means for UCF football's season. And Murph gets to referee that. So we will put the black and white stripes on Brian and see how that works out. Plus some updates on the other sports as well. As always, you can follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are SB Nation's home for UCF athletics. You can follow us at facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret and UCF_Banneret on Twitter. You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon. You can follow Brian at Spokes_Murphy, Eric at Eric Lopez Elo, and subscribe to this podcast if you don't already on Apple Podcasts, not iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. All right, so let's get you to the news, which, came down yesterday. No, was it yesterday?
Yes, it was yesterday.
Okay,
depends when you're listening to this episode.
Well, it depends.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
How about we just say
it was Tuesday?
Yes, thank you. Okay, Tuesday. Basically 96 hours from kickoff, UCF and North Carolina announced that due to the impending incursion of Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas, UCF will not play North Carolina on Saturday at noon as was originally scheduled. By the way, I found the wording interesting from both squads. UCF said that it was canceled. However, North Carolina simply said the game will not be played. None of us are privy to the contract between the two schools that would with force majeure clauses and all that. So, no word as to whether or not there was a little bit of hint. There was a little bit of speculation about maybe moving it to a neutral site. There was a little bit of speculation out there about maybe moving the game's date, but UCF pretty much put the kibosh on that one. and there will be no UCF football this weekend. So, which is a bummer. But obviously, we're thinking about our good friends up in the Carolinas, and anyone out there who's listening, UCF fans and fans of everybody up there, batten down the hatches, and obviously we wish them well. We wish them hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. Especially our friends, by the way, in Greenville, at East Carolina University, who. They're going to get. They're right on the river is right there, the Tar River, and there's going to be quite a bit of storm surge that just rolls up that river, and obviously flooding is going to be a concern in addition to the winds. There's a little bit more geography in North Carolina than there is in Florida, so that's something that they have to deal with. But so obviously all of that is front of mind. No one's debating about that, but. Brian, the situation with UCF and North Carolina is it's such an unfortunate one because now this is the second consecutive year that UCF has a game with an ACC school wiped out because of a hurricane. So take us through the last, 72 hours and, when it started to become obvious that, man, this game is not going to be played.
Yeah, and actually, before I get into that, it's even the third consecutive year in which UCF has had a game postponed due to a hurricane. Back in 2016, UCF's game against Tulane was postponed by about a month due to Hurricane Matthew. This is the third season in a row in which a hurricane has impacted UCF's football schedule. UCF entered this week saying all the right things as if they were going to play, even though we kind of knew by Monday that there's no way this is going to happen. But Josh Heupel was I don't know if evasive is the right word, but he wouldn't comment on any sort of cancellations or any thought of postponement. He talked Monday about the team is trying to go 1-0 this week, and we're practicing out there for a game this Saturday. And I talked to Wyatt Miller and Mackenzie Milton on Tuesday. Both of them said, we're going to go 1-0 this Saturday. I said, well, what if you're not going to go 1-0 because there's no game? He goes, well, then we'll deal with that. But right now we're going 1-0. So they were locked in mentally. Wyatt Miller said there was no drop in focus, even with the pretty obvious what was going on in North Carolina. The players are still practicing as hard as usual. But yesterday, I would say around 1 p.m. Tuesday, word came in that, this game is not going to happen. Me and you, Jeffrey, sort of parsed through everything, looking for maybe a soupçon of hope that there would be a game this weekend due to the way things were worded. But Danny White, speaking tonight with Mark Daniels, left no doubt that there will not be a game this weekend. He's talked to Mark about how they had offered to host this game in Orlando, and they had talked to UNC about other locations, but that's impossible. Too many people are involved in this. He said there's 1,200 to 1,300 people that need to be involved to make this kind of move happen. And so for right now, UCF has got an 11th game schedule, and we got to figure out if this team can add a 12th game, which in its own merits is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's UCF did not leave very much wiggle room on that. So the bye week is the week of October 27th. I think that's the Saturday.
Correct.
Now, The problem is UCF's next game after that is a Thursday night conference game against Temple. So if they scheduled a game during the bye week, they would be giving themselves a very short week leading up to a conference game in order to play a non-conference game, which it kind of doesn't make sense really from an overall perspective, if you ask me. And if you look back at UCF's Twitter feed, I thought this was interesting. They the tweet right after the one announcing the game's cancellation said the following: "It is unlikely," this is UCF football's Twitter account, "it is unlikely the Knights will be able to replace the UNC contest with another game, as the Knights don't have a true open date. October 13 at Memphis, October 20 at ECU, November 1 versus Temple, Thursday. So I chimed in on Twitter, and I was like, translation, we're not going to play Nebraska, so stop asking. because everyone immediately went to October 27th and started looking at who's got a bye week on October 27th. Lo and behold, it turns out, who has a bye week on October 27th? The Nebraska Cornhuskers. You know who else?
Who's looking to add a game to their own schedule?
Exactly, because Nebraska had their opener against Akron wiped due to weather. In addition, you know who else has a bye week on October 27th? Although that's definitely not going to happen. That would be the Alabama Crimson Tide. So naturally, everyone's like, "Let's do this." The fans, all the Twitter ads are out there saying, let's make this happen. And I'm pretty sure Josh Heupel's like, no, I really like having that bye week before a conference game on a Thursday night. And quite frankly, I side with Josh Heupel on that one. Elo, you were taking a look at some of the things that were said at the night talk tonight. What stood out for you from that?
Well, that part you mentioned, which I definitely want to. I mean, we're going to talk about this a few things because I have some. I don't like the Temple being a Thursday night game thrown as an excuse, because a year ago we saw Miami was scheduled to play Georgia Tech on a Thursday night, and the ACC actually moved that game to 2 days later, Saturday, because they rescheduled the Miami-Florida State game the week earlier. So if they wanted to, they could have easily talked to Temple. The conference could have stepped in, and the networks, and they could have pushed the Temple game 2 days later to Saturday if you wanted to fit a game in on the 27th against anybody. Okay, just for the record. So I don't like that excuse about, well, you got Temple. They just don't want to. They don't want to lose their bye week. Just say it. You don't want to lose your bye week, right? I think that's really the reality. I don't use the Temple date as an excuse.
And last year, I forgive me for interjecting, but I just wanted to point out. Yeah. Remember that it was last year that when they put the Austin Peay game in during what was supposed to be UCF's bye week. Was it Austin Peay? Yeah. Yes. That resulted in something that we've talked about before. UCF ended up playing games in 11 consecutive weeks, and I know they went undefeated, guys, but let's face it, that defense was gassed at the end of the year, and I think that from a football perspective, it makes it makes sense for to keep the team fresh as they head down the stretch, because UCF is going to be competing for a conference title again, and B, this is the other thing from last year too, is that UCF actually lost 2 games due to the hurricane. Remember, they lost the Memphis game in the second week and the Tech game the third week. They had to make one of those games up because they were both home games. This is a road, and one of them was a conference game. This is one road non-conference game. So in terms of tickets and all that, obviously UCF was behind the 8 ball last year. That was like a nightmare scenario, losing 2 home dates. This not as big of a strike against them. Obviously, from a financial perspective, might be a little bit different from a football perspective, which we'll debate about later, Elo. But I think that's the part that gets lost in all this, is that UCF actually lost 2 games last year. They had to make one up.
Well, but then most importantly, it's a home date, and as we're going to get into this the sport now has become about business more than what's actually on the field. It doesn't. And this is where
way.
I know it's a shocking development. And what has happened is and I remember this very fondly because I was against this, when they allowed to add a 12th regular season game for college football scheduling. Everybody said, "Wow, this is great! It's going to attract more marquee non-conference." But in reality, it hasn't. What it has done, it's given schools opportunities to add a 7th home game and more revenue. And what happens now is you see more and more schools scheduling FCS home games as, quote, the 7th game. They haven't really changed the marquee scheduling. It's just now everybody's into, hey, let's play 7 home games at least from a revenue standpoint. Everybody's doing it, not just UCF or Alabama. Everybody's doing that. And as a result, nobody wants to give that up in a situation like this. Like, for example, some people, you brought up the neutral site. Like, if you're North Carolina, you're not giving this up to play a road game unless you're going to get the home game back. Now, we'll go through all those scenarios, but it's the same thing with UCF, like you mentioned. That's very important, especially for UCF from a standpoint of a business standpoint, because you don't have a, quote, major TV deal yet with your conference like the SEC does or the Big Ten. So to your point, UCF's trying to make up for 2 home dates that are lost. And so you rescheduled that, and I think as a result, I think they kind of did okay. But I think the Austin P, you bring up the Austin P, I think the Austin P game is another reason why they won't schedule another game, in my opinion. And this is why. What happened to that Austin P game? It was not a good crowd. Why?
Right.
Because it was a scheduled game that was added, and people are like, I don't want to see that game. So UCF's not really in a position. There's no interest. There's no reason to add an FCS opponent, for example. No one's going to go watch that in October. And I think it's the reason why, by the way, UCF, and this is what you were referring to about what Danny White said, which I thought was interesting. He was on the Night Talk show tonight at Burger U, and he said they did offer to host the game. North Carolina declined. He has a good relationship with the AD with North Carolina that goes back 2 decades, but he declined, right. And he understood that because UCF declined Georgia Tech's offer last year to host the game. And he admitted that he was not interested in a swap. And some people suggested, well, why couldn't North Carolina play at UCF this year, and then North Carolina in return go to UCF in UCF would go to North Carolina in 2020 because that's the home and home date. And Danny White made it, and I agree with this point. That is not in their best interest because one of the goals that Danny White's trying to do right now is to have a guaranteed, quote, Power 6 home game every year. Last year was supposed to be Georgia Tech. This year it was going to be Pittsburgh. Next year it's Stanford. The year after that it's North Carolina. Well, if you switch that, first of all, you lose that 7th home game that I just brought up.
Yeah. For
a road game. So it's not like you can just add a home game. Now you have to reshuffle the schedule to get an extra home game, and it just gets complicated. So it's not as simple as, we'll just flip. And that's where the business side of this, which I think it motivated a lot of these decisions. The PC thing, it's certainly, listen, I mean, a hurricane is significant, but we have seen schools like Virginia, by the way, who's playing Ohio and Vanderbilt, I think, Nashville. You can make games up, play neutral fields. But I think there is a business side to this. That was interesting what Danny White said, and I think he feels very confident about the way he's scheduling things. But I think it's about business, and to me, what is in the best interest from a business standpoint, and I think from a UCF standpoint, really, and this was interesting. They said even if they would have hosted this game, you could argue it's not a good deal for UCF because now you're going to ask 40,000 people to buy tickets in 2 or 3 days. Mm-hmm. How realistic is that considering you have ticket commitments to people that were supposed to be going to Chapel Hill for this game? So what do you do with the people that purchased tickets to that? So it would create a big headaches and all that. And I think that's why I knew from the get-go there was no way this game was going to get played from a business standpoint. I hadn't even brought up the motivation standpoint. Like if you're North Carolina, there is no reason for you to play this game.
Yeah.
You just got blown off the doors by East Carolina. You're 0-2. Everybody's probably right now wants Larry Fedora fired. It's actually easier for Carolina to cancel this game and, if possible, schedule a game in December against an FCS opponent and get their home game back and maybe help you get bowl eligible from that standpoint. It's actually easier to do that if you're North Carolina than, hey, let's play UCF in Atlanta, Orlando, wherever, and take a third loss, and now you're 0-3. So there was never, in my opinion, there was never a reason for North Carolina to play this game, and that's why I never thought that there was going to be interest in playing this game.
You know, as one of the other things that I thought that was funny, I forget who was the writer. You'll have to forgive me, but they they brought up along what you were saying, Ryan, Eric, was somebody.
Are you talking about Stuart Mandel?
Stuart Mandel, thank you. Yeah,
North Carolina actually hopes UCF schedule great.
Right. He said maybe UCF and North Carolina playing. And UCF North Carolina not playing helps UCF strength of schedule, which is ruthless but true. It should be noted, by the way, this is not obviously the only college football game, even in Division I, that's being profoundly affected by this. Georgia Southern is scheduled to play at number 2 Clemson. That was moved up to noon Saturday. Interesting, number 13 Virginia Tech was scheduled to play ECU in Blacksburg. Tech is that game's been postponed, and the Tech AD made no bones about the fact that he was unhappy about that. Whit Babcock, the AD, said, quote, "We certainly understand the need for safety, of course. We just felt that tomorrow making the decision then would have been more responsible and accurate. We informed ECU of this multiple times. They made the call yesterday. ECU did. They said, we're not showing up." So,
well, here's the thing. But this is a motive. You're East Carolina, you're Scotty Montgomery, and you are in danger of losing your job, which we have addressed in a previous podcast. So guess what? You've got an opportunity to get out of playing Virginia Tech, which was going to be a loss. That's why they're not playing that game.
Well, even if they did play the game, they would lose anyway. I mean.
But here's the thing: by not playing this game, that's one less loss on your schedule. By the way, you know where East Carolina is, and this is where people that are saying that no, this game should have been rescheduled. This is where the conversation. You know where East Carolina is actually hanging out right now?
Not in Greenville. I know that.
They're in Orlando.
Yeah,
they're going to be spending.
That's right. Yeah.
And this is where people are bothered by, like, wait a minute. Why are you in Orlando during the storm, but you can't play a game somewhere else? You can't play in a neutral field if you're going to be together anyway. And that's where I think this is a divided issue, because there are people that believe, yes, you shouldn't play a football game because you want the players to be with the families, right? That was the thing last year, that the players were separated. They want to be with the families. And I think that's a legitimate answer. But there's the other side of the coin. Is like, wait a minute, if you're all going to be together, what do you mean you can't play?
Well,
we've seen teams play during, not necessarily during a hurricane, but they played games in advance of a hurricane. For example, I think Wake Forest is still going to play their game Thursday night.
5:30 p.m. Thursday against Boston College. That's, yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of different. Remember last year, Florida ended up playing their game in Gainesville anyway. That Saturday when UCF did not play, Florida did. Now everybody's different in it, but there's a lot of differences of opinions, and I think it's what's the motivation? Is there a reason for you to play this game, or is there a reason for you not to play this game?
Yeah.
And I think there's some of that going on. They'll never admit it publicly because it's not PR or PC correct, but I do think there's some of that. Now Virginia Tech needs to settle down. Like if East Carolina doesn't want to play, then get over it.
Right.
Hey, if you want to play a game bad enough, why don't you call Danny White?
Yeah,
but they won't do that.
Virginia Tech
won't do that.
Yeah, Virginia Tech kind of looks like jerks doing that, to be honest with you.
Agreed. I agree. I thought it was tasteless how they called out East Carolina, and they took it down. They did a tweet where they kind of mocked East Carolina, and they did a video of Virginia Tech playing in the rain and all that, and I thought that was in very poor taste.
Yeah.
In that scenario. So but I think that's an example on how everybody's got different agendas in these situations, and I think it's going to get harder and harder. And we saw this with Hurricane Matthew and the fiasco that turned into with Florida and LSU. And I think we're seeing more and more of that everybody's got different agendas when it comes to this stuff. And it's going to be harder and harder to reschedule games like that unless it just works out. Can I bring up the Frost thing that you brought up? Because I thought that was idiot. Not you, but people that brought up that idea, which was maybe the dumbest idea of them. I mean, there have been a lot of dumb ideas this week, but that was by far the most idiotic, stupid idea I've ever heard. Oh, yeah, let's call Nebraska because Scott Frost, and let's play them because, there's so much reason for Nebraska to schedule that game, right? They get a lot of that.
Well,
game,
I think part of it stemmed from the idea that, Scott Frost apparently has such fond memories of his time at UCF that maybe he would help us out and do us a solid.
How is that helping him a solid? Like, the guy's trying to win games at Nebraska. I don't think losing – first of all, and I'm going to give credit. Mike Bianchi wrote a column about this, and he was 100% dead on this, and I encourage people to read this. Scott Frost, okay, I'll meet you. Let's just say for humor. Okay, so if Scott Frost schedules that game, first of all, where's the game being played? You think he's just going to automatically come here to Orlando for good? Okay, good luck with that. And what, you're going to say UCF's going to come to Nebraska instead? Okay, so Frost plays that game. Who knows that UCF roster, other than the current staff, who knows that UCF roster better? Scott Frost, right? Would you say his staff knows? Don't you think he cares about those players?
Yeah.
A lot. And I'm going to speak this from experience because obviously Coach Gillespie I worked with for 11 years. She left UCF for Iowa, but I've worked with her 11 years. When she got the Iowa job, I joked with her, so are you going to do you want me to put in a good word with the new coach to schedule you in your own tournament here at UCF? Bring Iowa here. And I joked, and she laughed, but she said, and I think this is the same, it holds true in football. She said she would not want to play UCF because, first of all, she cares about those players. She recruited those players. She knows those players. The last thing she wants to do is play them in an awkward situation. It's awkward. It'll be emotional. If you lose to them, well, now you lost to the team that you just left. So that's tough. If you beat them, well, now you beat a team that you cared about, a bunch of people you care about.
Yeah.
And now you feel like a jerk. And I think it's the same thing with Scott Frost here. If he schedules that game and loses to UCF, now it's like, well, why did you leave UCF? Oh, look at that. And Nebraska people are like, why are we losing to UCF?
Nobody wins.
And if he beats UCF, now Scott Frost is the bad guy at UCF. He's the guy that took down UCF. So how is he to gain on that? He's in a no-win situation there.
Nobody wins. Nobody wins on that. Just a couple of notes on this. Some of the other games that have been moved, postponed, canceled, whatever. I mean, this storm is wreaking havoc on the college football world. West Virginia at North Carolina State, postponed. Marshall at South Carolina, canceled. Southern Miss at App State, postponed. Ohio at Virginia, relocated to Nashville, moved to 4:30 p.m. But you mentioned BC and Wake moved up to 5:30 Thursday. Campbell and Coastal Carolina, they actually played Wednesday at 2. I think Coastal Carolina won that game, and it was moved to Campbell Stadium in Bowie Creek. Stetson, by the way, scheduled to play Presbyterian, was moved to DeLand. Colgate and Furman canceled. Robert Morris at James Madison moved to Thursday from Saturday. Norfolk State at Liberty postponed until December unless Norfolk State makes the FCS playoffs, which is unlikely, they said. Elon, William & Mary, Charleston Southern Citadel, Tennessee State Hampton, North Carolina Central, South Carolina State got affected by this. And in addition, there are other games that that are sort of being affected by this that are scheduled for, or at least they're waiting on these kinds of things, like Old Dominion, which is D1 now at Charlotte, scheduled for Saturday at Charlotte, Western Carolina Gardner. It goes on and on. There's just a bunch of games that are being affected by this. All right, so obviously we're going to keep track of things. When we hear about it, you'll hear about it. And follow UCF_Banneret for information on this. All right. Let's bring Murph in here real quick because, Murph, you're going to put on the black and white shirt that we got you from, I don't know.
Yeah, Murph, in honor of Mick Foley's 20-year anniversary of the Cell match. Mick Foley was announced this week as the special guest referee at a Hell in a Cell main event between Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman. You get to play the role of Mick Foley, special guest referee here, as me and Jeff are about to duke it out of it.
All right, mankind. So here's what we'll do. The question at hand, Eric Lopez, that you and I are going to debate is as follows. And we had this on Twitter earlier, but here is the debate we're going to answer tonight, once and for all. The question is, does UCF losing this game against North Carolina, losing as in it not being played, does that hurt UCF, help UCF, or not do anything for UCF? Strictly from and we're arguing this simply from a football perspective. We're not arguing about, the morality of playing football in Hurricanes. I think that's fairly obvious to everybody. I will deliver the opening salvo here, and we will have rebuttals. There's no time clock, so we're not going to do any of that. So anyway, here we go. So Murph, you are the referee on this. You call the shots. All right, here we go. And by the way, we'll also have, what? When I post the podcast, we'll have the fans vote on this on Twitter. So here we go.
Oh God!
All right. My take on this is yes. This definitely will at least have the potential, if not certainly will, hurt UCF from a football perspective later in the year. And the reason is this. I grant you, Eric, that UNC is probably not going to have a very good season. Larry Fedora is on the verge of being fired. They got clobbered by an East Carolina team that had just lost to an FCS team the week before. All right. However, The reason why I do believe that not playing this game hurts UCF is because first of all, it was likely, I think, that UCF would have won the game. I think they would have had at least a 50% chance of winning the game in Chapel Hill as it was, considering where North Carolina is right now. Now, that being said, last year we saw the argument creep up about UCF's strength of schedule. That, in all of the arguments about that, you see that they said, well, you didn't. One of the arguments that popped up was, well, you didn't play Georgia Tech because of that hurricane, and you ended up playing Austin Peay. What is that? Never mind the fact that Austin Peay should have made the FCS playoffs and didn't, and never mind the fact that Georgia Tech, I think, finished 5-6 last year. The perception is because Georgia Tech was an ACC opponent that UCF is going to play on the road, that by default, UCF's schedule was automatically weaker than it could have been, and that hurt UCF in the course of the season leading up to the final weekend. Now, I'm not saying that if UCF had played Georgia Tech and won the game, that they would have gotten into the college football playoff. I actually don't think that would have happened at all, and I don't know anyone who does think that. However, it's very obvious that in UCF's argument about how good their season was last year, that hurt their argument in the eyes of at least some in the college football world. And I think some of the people who thought that it hurt are certainly voters in the coaches, AP, and in the CFP rankings. So I believe that applies here as well. UCF losing a game, or not, again, I keep saying losing a game. UCF not playing a game or having a game canceled against an ACC opponent on the road that, like it or not, if you let's say there was this alternate universe where UCF played North Carolina and beat them, and probably beat them soundly, a la what East Carolina did. Because of the mere fact that, never mind their records, never mind any of that, because UCF would have played an ACC opponent on the road and beaten them, likely soundly, it would have planted the seed in the minds of national voters who don't pay attention to UCF very carefully that, oh wow, this team is really good. Look what they did to an ACC team, and if they do it again to Pitt in the following weeks, even better, right? So, considering the fact that UCF started the season ranked, which they didn't do last year, it took them a while to get into the rankings. A win over North Carolina gets the national people who are, like we said, they don't pay attention to UCF as closely as we do, or the UCF Twitter Mafia does, for that matter. You see that result come across the ticker, and you think, oh, this UCF team really is for real. They walked into Chapel Hill and beat up on North Carolina. That team's good. You don't have that now. Now they can make that argument that, oh, well, let's say UCF does go undefeated this year and wins the conference. They can still say, well, you didn't play that North Carolina game. That was your lone Power 6 game or Power 5 game on the road. And, if UCF goes undefeated, obviously they would have beaten Pitt along the way. Well, the one team you did beat was Pitt at home. So they automatically are going to discount that. That is my case for why UCF not playing this game against North Carolina may very well end up hurting UCF in the long run. I cede the balance of my time. Mr. Lopez.
Well, first of all, you partly made my point by saying you even acknowledged by not the Georgia Tech game did not affect their standings. They weren't going to make the playoff if they beat Georgia Tech. I don't think they were going to move up in the rankings. I think that was already going to happen regardless. Because here's the deal. If they play that game and they beat Georgia Tech, people would just say, well, Georgia Tech's not any good. So, and that would be the same thing here. North Carolina is actually going to end up being worse than that Georgia Tech team. They're already 0-2. The other problem is North Carolina just got blown out by an East Carolina team that lost to an FCS team in North Carolina A&T. So this game is actually below the radar. Nobody even cares. So they're not a good quality game.
Okay, but
not at all.
Let me make this point. Let's say in this alternate universe, UCF walks into Chapel Hill and throws 56 points on North Carolina.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not the same ranking.
That wouldn't raise any eyebrows nationally, in your opinion.
No.
I disagree.
None. I think actually, in fact, I would make this prediction. You know what would happen if that happened? Larry Fedora would get a pink slip right after the game.
Well, we don't know that.
well, the game's not going to get played. That's why. But I think that's what would have happened. I actually think that would have been more of the focus of, wow, look at North Carolina, how bad it's coming. Is Larry Fedora going to keep his job? Paul Feinbaum was speculated about Larry Fedora's job after the East Carolina game. That only would have been intensified if they would have gotten crushed by UCF, which I think they would have. So, no, I don't think North Carolina registers at all. I don't. And by the way, here's the difference between the Georgia Tech and the Carolina game. I think what hurt UCF in the Georgia Tech argument, it's not that they didn't play the game. And I think this is what hurt them, was the fact that there were Georgia Tech people that were saying that UCF ducked them. Because remember, Georgia Tech offered the game and UCF declined. And remember, there was follow-up stories about how Georgia Tech offered the game and they could have played the game on Saturday in Atlanta. And so I think some people took that as a way to use that against UCF. I don't agree with that, but I do think – so I think it had more to do with the fact that UCF didn't want to play the game in Atlanta than not actually playing the game. Now, some people might use the excuse of, well, they didn't play a full schedule, I guess. But I don't think that the committee's like, wow, well, they beat Carolina. Let's move them up 4 spots. Not at all. I think they would have – in fact, UCF just got dropped – or not dropped, but they got passed by Boise State this past week because Boise State crushed Connecticut by a bigger score than UCF did. And guess what? If Boise State beats Oklahoma State, it doesn't matter what UCF would have done. Boise State was going to even go further ahead of UCF, and I think other teams would jump UCF anyway in the rankings. So, no, I don't think this game would have helped them at all. I don't think this hurts them at all. I think it's because Carolina's terrible. If North Carolina was good, then, yeah, you have a case. But here's North Carolina's schedule. They're 0-2. They're scheduled to play Pittsburgh. We'll see if that works out. That's a toss-up game. They go to Miami. They're going to lose that game. That's 3 losses. They play Virginia Tech. That's a 4th loss. They're going to go to Syracuse. I think they lose that game. That's 5 losses. I think they'll have an interim coach by this point. They may or may not beat Virginia. That's a toss-up game. Georgia Tech, toss-up game. I think they lose to Duke. Their one guarantee that they can get a win is Western Carolina at the end of the year. This team could go 3-9 very easily with a new interim coach by the end of the season. I don't think that would have impressed the pollsters or the committee at all if UCF plays that game. I think people will be like, well, they beat a bad team in a Power 5. I don't buy that at all, and I think that's to suggest that by not playing this game, UCF is hurt by it. No, I don't. UCF is – I hate to break this to you. UCF ain't going to make the playoff. Now, and I hate to break this to you too. Let's say – UCF and Boise State both win their leagues and have the same record.
Yeah. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Right. So let's play this out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right. I'll let you pick the scenario. Do you want to go with the scenario where they're both undefeated, or do you want to go with a scenario where they're both at 1 loss?
Let's go with. Well, we don't know which game either team would lose to. Okay, so let's for the sake of argument say they both go undefeated at the end of the conference championship games.
Boise State will get the nod because their win against Oklahoma State, which is a top 25 team at this time, and it is a Big 12 team, will trump any UCF win on the schedule. Even if Carolina is on the schedule, doesn't matter. They would trump it. Not to mention, some might argue right now that the Mountain West is maybe slightly better than the American this year with some of the teams in the league. Who knows? I don't necessarily agree with that, but maybe they're even. The other thing that hurts UCF, and this could be applied to even if both teams have a loss, you have a coach in the American Conference by the name of Randy Edsall who has now gone on record saying that I think Boise State's a better team than UCF, a little better. He said that. Those are the things that are going to hurt UCF more than playing this Carolina game, is the fact you got Randy Edsall saying after the Boise State game that he thinks Boise State is a little better than UCF, and he played both of them.
Randy Edsall needs to do a better job of representing the conference, but
right?
Okay, let's concede that, and I'm going to throw it to Murph for his judgment here in a second. All other things being equal, I still think that when you have people like Soren Petro who are voting in the Associated Press poll, who clearly are not paying attention to as much football as they need to be in order to have that.
And he's not going to pay attention on North Carolina game either.
The bottom line is he's not alone in the fact in not having UCF, in not paying as much attention to UCF as he should. And the way you get that attention is by whacking an ACC team on the road. And unfortunately, UCF doesn't have the opportunity. No, believe me when I tell you that you know some of these voters, and you know how they don't pay attention to them to all the things that they need to pay attention to. And if UCF went up to North Carolina, like I think they would have, and thrown 50 on the Tar Heels at home, regardless of whether or not Larry Fedora gets fired, I think that would have raised some serious eyebrows, and then it would have looked even more stupid for somebody to leave UCF off their ballot than it would have otherwise. Now, again,
they're going to tell you that North Carolina is garbage. That's what the argument is. They played a garbage. It's the same thing, by the way. And I know this because this happened last year.
Okay, but if they're garbage and UCF blows them out, then UCF did exactly what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, but that's not going to impress anybody. That doesn't impress anybody. Just like when South Florida blew out Illinois last year in Tampa, nobody cared because Illinois was terrible.
I disagree with that.
That guy's a terrible example. He still voted for Auburn ahead of UCF after the Peach Bowl.
But also I disagree with you also on the USF Illinois thing, because that game was played in Tampa and this is a road game.
Who cares? They still blow. By the way, they're going to play Illinois this weekend. They're probably going to kick their ass in Chicago, and guess what? No one's going to care. Terrible.
All right. So
let's go.
Okay, look, Murphy is ready to throw flags here. So Murph, I toss it to you. What is your judgment?
So I'm gonna ruin the suspense like right away. I will declare a winner, and then I will declare the reasons for why that person is the winner.
Okay.
My FaceTime on a podcast, parentheses on a podcast, my FaceTime goes to Eric Lopez.
Oh.
And here's why. Jeffrey, I'm with you at the start of this.
Okay.
I'm in your camp. We talked off air that I believe this is not a good thing for UCF, but the reasons for why we think this is not a good thing are very different. And for you to use the argument that North Carolina is a good win is a bad argument. That is a bad argument.
Wait. I'm not saying that it's equivalent to like the Auburn game last year. But what I'm saying is going up there and going up and kicking the tar out of the Tar Heels is not a bad thing for UCF's attention nationally.
You said, what will they say if they drop 56 on them? And I thought to myself as you were arguing, I said, well, they'll tell them that UCF is 15 points better than ECU because ECU put 41 on them. It's not a team and a game at noon on Saturday on ESPNU against a team that's 0-2, got crushed by ECU, is not moving the needle. It's really not moving the needle that much, even if it's ACC. This team is awful. I initially agreed because it's bad for UCF to lose a game in terms of the Group of 5 bid. They need as many games as they can. They need wins, period. They're going to lose a win because they're going to lose a game off the schedule. That's important. That's why this is important. It's not important because, well, they could have crushed North Carolina. East Carolina crushed North Carolina. It doesn't really make a statement. The fact they're not playing the game at all is more damning. So I thought Eric generally had the much better argument.
You guys are haters, and UCF Twitter mafia is on my side.
Hold on, let me ask you, why isn't people praising Scotty Montgomery for turning around East Carolina and blowing out North Carolina this week instead of people speculating about Larry Fedora's job?
Irrelevant.
If that's such a, it's the same thing. What are you talking about? Like, by your theory, East Carolina should be getting praised for blowing out North Carolina, and Scotty Montgomery should get praised with. Not at all, because Carolina's not very good. Now I'll say this. If Roy Williams was the head coach or Sam Dorrance and we're playing at a soccer field or the basketball arena, absolutely UCF would get a lot of credit for beating North Carolina. But this ain't a soccer match and this ain't a basketball game. It's a football game.
Jeffrey, you have a well-intentioned opinion. You just didn't go about it I think the best way.
Gosh, isn't that the story of my life?
Murph was willing to help. I felt like Murph had a foreign object ready to hand it to you, and you just didn't take it. I feel
I do have a foreign. I do have a foreign object. Several of them. I have UCF Twitter mafia on my side. So, vote for who won the argument on our Twitter account UCF_Banneret. Again, keep it posted. We'll keep you posted on anything that we do here. I think that there's like to quote you, Eric, and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt on this one, a 0.0% chance that a game does get scheduled for October 27th, nor would I schedule a game there for UCF. It's a bummer that you lose a winnable road game against an ACC opponent.
It doesn't matter. Here's the thing. Let me ask you this.
He just won't give it up. I got a break to get to for crying out loud.
I will bring 2 quick points, and then we'll let it go. If UCF goes undefeated and Boise loses to Oklahoma State and has 1 loss, do you really think UCF's going to get left out because they didn't play North Carolina? No. They're going to get picked for that all-access bowl if they're undefeated and they win the American Conference and Boise has a loss. They're going to pick the team. They have historically picked the team with a better record, so they would pick UCF in that scenario. So the North Carolina game doesn't hurt them in that regard from a wins column. Now, I will say this. This is an interesting point because I talked to some people on the outside about this.
Here's where Eric brings in the ringer. Go ahead.
There is some people that think we'll throw this out, and people aren't going to like this statement, but that's going to make it easier for them to go undefeated. That's going to be floated out there, I think, in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
And people are going to get upset about that. So that's where if you want to make the argument where this losing this game hurts, that narrative that I think will pick up, that makes it easier for them to go undefeated.
Which, by the way, was what I said was one of the arguments that was trotted out last year. You didn't play Georgia Tech.
I'm giving a partial credit from that. If you would have gone straight on that argument, I think you would have had a better shot to Murph's point.
But when we talked about the chances of this team going undefeated before the season started, and we talked about our best case, worst case scenarios, go back and listen to that podcast. I don't know how many of us brought up the North Carolina game. I don't think any of us did because we knew North Carolina was missing their starting quarterback, one of their really good defensive players. We pretty much considered that the biggest threats to UCF's schedule are Memphis and South Florida, not North Carolina. So I don't know. I mean, it's easier, yes, because they don't have a chance to lose a game. So, yes, not having a chance to lose does make it easier for you to go undefeated. It's amazing how that works. But I really don't think this game was seen as a threat to end their streak. Jeffrey, you have the right intentions, but when you throw in ACC and say that and because this team is ACC meaningful, it really doesn't help that ECU just dropped them by 23. It really doesn't help your argument. And I would say also, Randy Edsall needs to remember what conference he plays in and works for.
Is 100% true.
Oh, that's a fact, by the way. That's a fact. You could actually Google.
We all agree on that.
UCF helps you. They put money in your pocket.
Yeah.
I think that's a more incriminating thing that I would be more concerned about.
Yeah.
Randy Edsall should go. Maybe Randy Edsall should go coach North Carolina. Anyway.
Careful what you
careful what you wish for, Chapello. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, special interview coming up. We're going to talk volleyball. We got Jenny Frank. She's in the Ring of Honor at UCF Volleyball, one of the greatest players in UCF history, even coached at UCF for a time. She's going to come by and talk about UCF Volleyball then and UCF Volleyball now, and we'll catch you up on the Olympic sports as well. Women's soccer, men's soccer, lots of stories to talk about on that end as well when we return. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Back after this. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Unger Real Estate Group, brokered by eXp Realty. Sam Unger and his team proudly serve Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties, specializing in buying, selling, and new construction. He's a proud UCF graduate, class of 2006, and he's got a special deal going on right now for the 2018 football season. Night fans, if you work with Sam as your realtor, he will rebate you up to $750 at closing. So, if you're ready to buy a new home or sell your current home, upgrade or downsize, Sam and his team have you covered so you can find the right home at the right price in the right location. So give them a call right now at 407-790-9957. Again, that's 407-790-9957. Or visit them on the web at WeSellOrlando.net. Again, that's WeSellOrlando.net. You can also reach them on Facebook at facebook.com/WeSellOrlando. Get in touch with the Unger Real Estate Group today and make finding your dream home a reality.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you. blackandgoldbanneret.com is your home for UCF sports on the SB Nation blog network. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter and Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Subscribe to this podcast on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn or Apple Podcasts. I keep saying iTunes. It's Apple Podcasts. You know what we're talking about. Anyway, all right, let's dive into our interview for this week. I was lucky. You know, we were kind of, Eric and I, when we were doing our summer sessions over the summer, we started reaching out to a bunch of friends of ours from UCF Athletics. And one of the people we reached out to is Jenny Frank, formerly of UCF Volleyball, played from 2000 to 2003. She's one of the greatest players in UCF history. She is she's second all time UCF in assists, and she's in the Ring of Honor at UCF Volleyball. And I'm sad we didn't do this earlier. We really should have. It's just been way long overdue. But Jenny reached back, and we were able to do this. And I'm so excited to talk with Jenny because, you know, I covered UCF Volleyball for 4 years when I was a student, when she was there. And watching her play day in and day out, she was just she gets my vote as probably as, well, I mean, you'll hear it in the interview, but it's just so good to talk to Jenny. And she has offered up some interesting thoughts about, you know, volleyball today and UCF today. And she still wears black and gold on her sleeve quite a bit. So anyway, here is our interview with number 14 from UCF Volleyball. Always remember is that Jenny Frank. And joining me now, for my money, the greatest setter in UCF Volleyball history. She is second all-time in assists in UCF history with 4,825. In her career, she was a one-time All-American, three-time All-Conference. She won 3 conference championships, 3 all-tournament teams. I could go on and on for the next half an hour, but we don't have that kind of time. Jenny Frank joins me here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jenny, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing so good. I'm so glad to talk to you. Okay, so a little history for the listeners. All right, so I came to UCF as a freshman in the fall of 2001. You arrived as UCF as a freshman in the fall of 2000. So I was there for your last 3 years, and then one of your years, I believe, as an assistant coach. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's right. So, and those were some good years. I did radio play-by-play for UCF Volleyball for those 4 years that I was there. The last 3 years of your career, 3 conference championships. If I'm not mistaken, I think at least 2 of them were won on the home floor in what was then UCF Arena, what is now the venue. Tell me about, like, when you look back on your 4 years, what is your fondest memory of playing volleyball at UCF?
Oh, gosh. There's a lot. I would have to say my fondest memory would be you get to see everybody in all colors of their life. So you get to see them at their best and you get to see them at their worst. And I think that further develops your relationships that are long-term. And to this day, that whole team, from my 4 years there, we all still talk and we're all still in communication. We keep up with each other. So I would have to say that's probably my best memories to come out of there, which I guess is also an experience.
Who? So give us an example. Like, who are some of the players that you played with back in the day that you're still in touch with and that you still get together with these days?
Sure. So Tanya Jarvis, and everybody probably has different last names now. Lindsay Whalen, Kelly Klinkenberg, Kate Street, Shelly Driggers, Piper Morgan. Those girls were actually older than I was.
Yeah.
So I played with them for my freshman and sophomore year. Michelle Spalletta, and I could name them all.
Yeah, I can. I had the good fortune of having a front row seat for the 3 conference titles that you guys won under Meg Collado in 01, 02, and 03. Describe for us, like, just how dominant. I know this is kind of like opening up to bragging, right? But just how dominant UCF volleyball was at that time when you guys were in the A-Sun. It was just a lot of fun to watch because we knew that we were in for a great performance every day.
Yeah, so one of the things that Meg was very consistent with before every game, when you are one of the top teams in the conference consistently, you always get every team's best performance. Mm-hmm. So something that was always reiterated to us before every match is it doesn't matter what their record is, it doesn't matter who you're playing, you're going to get their best match. So that always kept us on our toes and mentally prepared for what was to come, and knowing that we probably had to give a better performance than we did the week before or prior to.
You were always in such control of the team. I think that was probably the most fun thing. It's like the setter is the point guard in volleyball. What is as far as, but I mean, it doesn't take, I knew almost nothing about volleyball until I began watching you. From a player's perspective, what is, I don't want to say what's the job of the setter, but when you were out on the floor, what was your objective out there every single time you played?
So every position and individual is different. And for us, I feel it's important as a setter to understand each individual's strengths, but also their weakness. And I also feel like it's our responsibility to make sure that if we know somebody is having one of their best performances of their career, that we need to make sure we keep it that way. Mm-hmm. And if they're not maybe having their best performance of their career, then we need to figure out how to keep them in the match or make up for them.
There were always so many different players that you played with who were great in their own right. And you had such a key role in that. Player, not just from the middles, from, players like, Piper Morgan and, Shelly, you mentioned Shelly Driggers, Shelly Krager, I think also in your sophomore year. But also players, on the outside that got a lot of work. Players like Amanda Staugesdijk. You mentioned Tanya Jarvis, Leray Asante when she was there. When you look back on some of the players that you played with, how do those teams, do you think, stack up with, say, volleyball today? Like if we could put you guys in like a Madden game, right? And you could play now against like then, how do you think it would turn out?
Oh gosh, we actually have these conversations for some of us that are still involved in volleyball. And I will have to say, I think I don't want to say anything bad, but our team was very competitive. And so at the end of the day, it didn't really matter who we were playing. We were always competitive. And I think sometimes the competition and mindset of being competitive gets lost. Mm-hmm. And I know that was something that we worked really hard to maintain just throughout each day of practice. So I think that would probably be it, just knowing how competitive we were. It probably doesn't matter. We would probably try to win today, even though we're all slightly washed up.
So now with UCF now, you've been to a couple matches. We ran into each other, I know, at least one match last year, and I've seen you a couple of times. You're in the Ring of Honor now, which is so cool to see. The UCF right now has probably, I guess I would say, is, now that I'm again have a front row seat for it, I think the two best setters that they've had since you played in Amber Olsen and Erin Olsen. Now, Erin, obviously the elder sister, she's a junior. Amber just started her freshman season. when you watch them play, what do you see in them that, as a setter, you're like, okay, I know that that they're good at what they do?
From what I have seen, I would have to say they do move the ball around, and they keep it pretty consistent, knowing which hitters to go to and understanding their court savviness and what is happening throughout the plays. I think that's one thing that I have appreciated, because I think in the past some of that has been lost, and I think that is coming back with the two new setters that are there.
Yeah. Now you, after you graduated, well, tell us, you graduated after the 2003 season, I believe, the spring of 2004, but then you stayed pretty close to UCF Volleyball. So let's go pick it up from there. After you finished playing, what did you do after that?
Sure. So when I was done, I went to Europe, actually, and I played a little bit. I didn't play too long, and I came back, and I wasn't ready to be done with volleyball, so I actually went to Tulane, and it was the year of Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
So I had moved there 3 weeks prior to, and long story short, fast forward, the spring of 2006, I believe, Meg Colato had called me and said, we have an opening as an assistant back here at UCF, and obviously it was my alma mater, and it was nothing against Tulane. I really loved New Orleans, but you always want to make it back to your alma mater. Can't blame Scott Frost. I had to throw that in there. So it was an opportunity, and at the time I was flexible in where I was, and so I literally picked up, I think, 2 weeks later, and I was back for the end of spring of 2006, and then was there till 2008. Yeah.
It was a tough transition there for UCF Volleyball for a time. Because you go from a program that had some amazing success in the ASUN, and let's face it, like the competition really did step up once we got to Conference USA. Describe for us like what the real difference is. Like, as you step up in the competition level, how steep was the climb?
I would say it was gradual to start, and then it gets pretty steep after that, just because in differences where there was a higher level of play more consistently than sporadically. And so I know, because at the time of the ASUN, Meg also would schedule higher caliber teams that were ranked teams within either the state of Florida or that were close for our tournament, so that we were able to still compete against that. So I think the biggest adjustment was having to constantly compete at that type of a level and understanding what the pace of that game was.
One of our favorite memories was in 2000, I believe it was December 2003, was you guys going up to Gainesville, where it seemed we went every year, and defeated then Conference USA Cincinnati in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Take us back to that match and just how incredible a night that was for you personally and for UCF Volleyball as a program.
Oh my gosh, you're bringing back memories and goosebumps. So that year alone, any match that we took to 5 games, we always won. We were undefeated. If we went to 5, we knew we were going to win, because we weren't always the biggest team, but we were always the most athletic team, and so we could really outpace if we got to the 5th game. So at Cincinnati, we get to the 4th game, and I'm trying to remember exactly, but we won the 4th to make it go to the 5th. And really from that point forward, you can feel it. You can see it in everybody, and you just know that at that point, all right, you're in the 5th game. It doesn't matter how high the points are going to go. We're going to win it, because right now is not the time for us to not in a 5-game match. So it was pretty intense, and I think I would say I remember it being 10-9, because it was a close one. I'm pretty sure I set Emily Watts, and she got a kill. And then from that point forward, I think we finished out the match. So just knowing that, and you have the turn of events and you can feel it, it just makes for a pretty crazy night.
When you look at the sport now you coach now. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's at OTVA. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't even realize it until I did even a little bit more research into it, like just how influential, the work that you do at OTVA is with helping young setters figure out the game and learn the game and learn from you. Tell me what that's like, when you actually are able to coach young players on the ground level about the ins and outs of doing the job that you did so well for UCF as a player.
Sure. It's very gratifying. I really enjoy that I get to meet with them and train them more on a personal level, where it's not only about setting. We talk about characteristics of a setter. We actually talk about characteristics of what an outside should be, a middle should be, and if they don't see those characteristics, how they're supposed to adjust to that. So at the end of the day, it's not always about the skill of setting. I mean, you're a setter. You're supposed to set. Mm-hmm. It's everything that comes with it. And I think one of the awesome things is when I see them go to college, and I've watched a couple of them play now in their college matches, and all of them have played as freshmen, and they're doing awesome. And so it's nice that they can always come back to me too. I get text messages or Facebook messages from them every now and then just about life and stuff. So I think it's developing that relationship and knowing that I do have an impact still, even though I'm not coaching them.
Right. So with, we're coming up on the last tournament weekend, and then it's off to conference play for UCF Volleyball. When are we going to see you back around? I know we saw you a couple times last year. You always make your way around. When will you be back around so we can see you again?
Sure. So there's a bunch of alumni coming in November. I believe it's the first week of November, and we're all planning on going to those matches. Good.
I think that's homecoming weekend, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, for football? And then
I think so. Yeah. I'm not quite. Jana Mitchell is the coordinator. So.
Oh, Jana's in charge? Okay.
Yes,
gotcha.
She is.
Gotcha. See, there's another name that everyone that you remember about all that kind of stuff. It's so much fun when I see you guys, because obviously now I do PA in the arena for UCF Volleyball, and I have for the last 3 years, and I know it's a special weekend when I see you and people like Chaz Ara and Tanya came by. I actually saw Tanya last weekend because I think one of her former players is playing for one of the teams that was in the tournament with UCF this weekend. So she was down, and we were talking. We were talking about you too. So I know it's always good things, Jenny. You know that. But it's always good to see you guys come around, and I don't think people fully appreciate the great tradition that UCF Volleyball has, not just going back to 1978 and the national championship, but also the run that you put together. And I think one of the teams before you, there were 2 3-peats back there. So, and one of them belongs to you. You got the 3 championship rings to show for it. So, it's always good to catch up with you, and it's fun. Now, let me ask you real quick before I let you go. UCF is a very young team this year. 1 senior, 6 freshmen. Yeah. I mean, you know how tough that is. From a playing perspective, from a coaching perspective. What do you think about the team this year? What do you think that they can do in the American this year?
Well, from what I've seen so far, I think they'll do very well. When you have young teams in any sports, you prepare yourself for young heirs, and then all you can do is coach up from that point forward. But I do think they'll finish, my predictions, at least in the top 2.
Wow. Okay. So
that's right. I'm just going for it.
Yeah. See, the good thing is I can always count on you to wear your black and gold when it really counts.
That's right. That's right.
Jenny,
always and forever.
Jenny Frank, for UCF Volleyball alumna, one of the greatest players in program history. She's in the Ring of Honor. It's always good to catch up with you again, Jenny. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much to Jenny for coming on the podcast. It's always great to talk to her. Looking forward to that alumni weekend coming up for UCF Volleyball. That'll be in November. So you'll always see a lot of good friends, and she's always come down for all that at least once. And I'll see her at a few volleyball matches every every year. So, and she was so kind when she was a student, with us when we were doing radio. As we were, some of us hardly knew anything about volleyball, and we learned about how to play volleyball, about what good volleyball looks like by watching Jenny Frank play, and it was always good to talk to her. All right. Along those lines, let's catch you up on what else is going on with UCF sports. We'll come back to volleyball in a second, but we wanted to touch upon soccer because some crazy stuff happening this weekend in women's soccer. Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy. UCF women's soccer scheduled to their home opener got wiped earlier this year in what was their first game of the year back in mid-August against Florida Gulf Coast. So their actual home opener turned out to be this past Sunday against Florida. Florida's having a bad year. They actually haven't scored a goal since August 19th as a team, if you can believe that. Here we are in mid-September. But it's still Florida. So they come in Sunday, and UCF puts a hurting on them in the first half, in the first 45 minutes, drops 3 goals on them. One of them by Sam Chung, who actually transferred to UCF from Florida. Then, by the way, in front of a really good crowd, you can see the crowd out there on Twitter, UCF_W Soccer. Great crowd to see UCF take on Florida. Then the thunderstorms come. The game was started at 6 p.m. Sunday, September the 9th. The thunderstorm comes. UF says, yeah, we're not going to finish this game. We're hopping on a bus and heading back to Gainesville. So
that game got delayed. They didn't start it at 6. They got delayed, I thought, about a little while, an hour or 2 hours.
It did get delayed. Then they went back in the locker room for halftime. Then the Reigns game, they were like, delay again. And then they decide to stop the game. And UF decides to go home. Now, here's where the trick happens that for some reason, that apparently warps time and space. NCAA rules, Eric Lopez, state, as you accurately depicted, that if a soccer match does not reach the 70-minute mark and is halted by some sort of act of God, that the match never happened. It is not considered official. If you pick up the match at a later date, you actually cannot. You have to start the match over. So it turns out that having only played 45 minutes, that's exactly what happened. It was immediately announced that UF would come back down 1 p.m. Monday to play the game, but it would have to start over from 0-0 at 0 minutes. You couldn't pick it up second half, UCF up 3-0. So those 3 goals get wiped off the board. So what does UCF do? They end up winning 3-0 anyway on Monday, on Monday afternoon. Goals from Stephanie Sanders scored a goal. Zandy Soray scored 2 for UCF. But as it turns out, UCF, in the span of 18 hours, played 135 minutes of soccer against the University of Florida and defeated them 6-0, but only half of those goals counted, which was one of the most bizarre things I think I've ever seen, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the rule, because a lot of people are like, oh, there's kind of trying to figure out a conspiracy. And I could tell you, no, it's not. It's a fact. You have to play 70 minutes. And
everybody needs to
time,
take the tinfoil hat off on that one.
Right. I mean, and I wasn't there, but I mean, obviously they waited a certain time. And having gone through this with softball, I mean, these coaches get updates on the weather from the facilities people. They have radars and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if they were told, look, this is not going to clear up. And I remember that because I lost my cable service during that storm on Sunday night where I lost X amount of channels. So I'm sure they were thinking when I saw online that they wasn't going to clear up until maybe 11:30 at night. And the problem is, by the rule, the game is washed out. It's no different in other sports. We saw this earlier this year in Major League Baseball where the Boston Red Sox jumped all over Baltimore. But they only got 2 or 3 innings in, and Alex Cora was upset because it's like, why did we start this game if we knew we weren't going to be able to get this game in? Because they got to go 5 innings to make it official. Otherwise, the stats are wiped out and all that. 6 years ago as a softball broadcaster, we went up to Jacksonville. We played, and we had a big lead going into the bottom of we're going to the top of the 5th. I think it was the top of the 5th. Once. Then the rain came. Jacksonville very magically couldn't find the tarp. So
really?
they couldn't find a tarp.
What did they do? Forget it somewhere?
I guess you do. It's hard. It's a hard thing to find, I guess. So needless to say, it kept raining and raining, and the field became unplayable. So magically, we couldn't resume. And because we didn't play 5 innings, which is the rule in college softball, is you have to get 5 innings unless it's 4.5 innings if the home team is ahead. Otherwise, it's 5 innings. You got to get in. Well, because UCF only had gotten through 4.5 innings, and Jacksonville was the home team, that game didn't count. It was wiped out. Needless to say, we didn't make up the game. Needless to say, we didn't play him for a few years because we felt that there could have been a tarp that could have been found. But be that as it may, it's the same thing in soccer. It's 70 minutes. Don't ask me why it's 70 minutes. Why isn't it 60? Why isn't it 50? I don't know, because I've had this conversation with Murph. Baseball, for example, you only have to get 5 innings in to be eligible for a game. And Murph and I and you, Jeff, have sat through delays, even though it's not raining, and we're like looking at it like, why aren't we just starting to play? And the reason is you don't want to start a game that you don't think you can finish or get the majority of the game in. And so that was unfortunate. Credit to Coach Saheda, I think, on this, agreeing to play that Monday morning, getting them to play Monday, because I think she knew if she doesn't play that game on Monday, she's not going to be able to do the Florida game all over again down the road, because it's in college soccer. It's harder to reschedule a game because of conference schedules and et cetera. And I think also she realized I've got a psychological edge here, believe it or not, because I think the perception was on social media, because this kind of blew up on social media. And a lot of people were concerned that, oh, wow, now they got to beat Florida again. And that's a negative. The positive is, and you brought this up, is I think Coach Sahedek's like, fine, we'll play you Monday, because I think she knew, based on how that first half went, that I think she felt, A, you got the better team, B, I've got a psychological edge on this team because we just whipped them through 45 minutes, and if you can get a good start on Monday, then it'll be the same story, and it was. Yeah.
I think that the other thing that that I thought was an interesting point about the game was I think that the reason why all the tinfoil hat people were out about this was because, if you instantly say, well, we're going to pick up the game tomorrow at 1 p.m., like within basically 18 hours, it's like, well, it's not like you're, and I was telling Murph this off the air, it's not like you're, UNLV or Washington State and you've got a plane to catch across the country. You're Florida, why don't you just pick up the game at 45 minutes? This doesn't make any sense. But like you said, doesn't matter. The rules are the rules, and that's how it is. Murph, have you ever seen you followed baseball. You ever seen anything like this before, where a team had like a massive advantage, but a game wasn't official, and then the whole thing got wiped, and then the result came out differently?
Where when they come back and play the game again, and then the different result?
Yeah.
I can't think off the top of my head. I mean, Eric brought up the game with the Red Sox and the Orioles. Pretty sure the Red Sox, though, ended up winning that actual game when they played it the next day. But no, I mean, I can't think of an example off the top of my head. I just think it is odd, and you guys have already said this, that, while other sports say you got to go halfway, soccer says you got to go 70 of 90. And that just seems like a really kind of weird, arbitrary endpoint for an official game.
Yeah, it would make more sense if it was 60. I think. But it's I don't know. It's one of the weirdest things ever. Where I remember the rule with baseball was the Cal Ripken game. You remember that?
Yeah.
When he finally passed Lou Gehrig, they had the whole ceremony after the game became, quote, official, which I think the Orioles were leading at that time, which meant it was against the then California Angels, which
thanks to a Cal Ripken home run,
thanks to a home run, that's right, and so they did it, I think, in the middle of the fifth.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, so that's where I remember that from baseball. But anyway, no RPI is out. UCF probably won't get helped in the coaches' rankings. They're not even receiving votes in the coaches' rankings, which is surprising to me. I mean, it's one thing if you're ranked or not ranked, but I'm surprised the Knights aren't even receiving votes after. And
they actually played North Carolina on the field.
Yeah, and they actually did. That's right, and took them to OT too, I think, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, anyway, we'll be catching up on that. UCF women's soccer, by the way, they are still home Thursday the 13th, 7 p.m. against George Mason. And they also play at Stetson in DeLand on Sunday the 16th at 7 p.m. And that's the first of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 3 on the road. They don't come back home again until October the 4th against East Carolina. So they start the conference schedule with a weekend on the road at Temple and at UConn. Good thing they're getting that out of the way before the bad weather hits in the northeastern part of the schedule. Men's soccer. This team is on a freaking roll right now. Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy. The hottest team in all of UCF right now, aside from football, who's won 15 in a row, I would argue it's men's soccer because they have won 11 of their last 15. They are 11-2-2 going back to their home opener last year against Stetson. This past week, they we talked about it before. They defeated West Virginia 1-0 on Friday, and then went down to FIU. This is Coach Calabrese's old stomping grounds down in Miami, and threw 3 goals on FIU, 2 of them from Cal Jennings, who just continues to impress. And UCF men's soccer right now in the United Soccer Coaches rankings, they're not in the top 25, but they are receiving votes. And what I think is actually most impressive is not just how hot they've been since the middle of last year, but this team is offensively a fireworks show. They are number 1 in the country in shots on goal. Number 1 in the country. There's no shot this team has ever met that it didn't like, and that makes for an exciting brand of soccer.
I didn't know that we had to add to that. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. They're very explosive, you know.
I think back to our interview that we had with Coach Calabrese at the beginning of the year when we asked him, hey, you had Cal Jennings who really stepped up last year, and he's like, well, it's got to be, a little bit more of a team effort, and in order to pick up, what we lost last year from a scoring load. And I'm like, well, so far so good, Coach. I mean, this team is scoring goals all over the place, and it's impressive to see the pressure that they're putting on the net. I was watching some of the game, and they are just full throttle all the time. And man, they can pass. They play an exciting brand of soccer. They are at DeLand themselves on Saturday, September 15th at 7. And then they start the conference season also at Temple Friday 21st at 7 p.m. They come home for SMU. Boy, that game is looking big. 7 p.m. on Friday, September 28th. That's their next home game. And I'm looking through the top 25. Where is SMU? They were up there.
It reminds me a little bit of what we saw with football in Frost's second year, right? How quick? I mean, they're buying in the Calabrese system even quicker maybe than maybe some would have thought. I mean, we had him on. He mentioned that to some extent they maybe were ahead of schedule based on last year. But you're right. They seem to be clicking on their offensive philosophy, and that's exciting. And they were picked in the preseason to win the American. And you're right. Mm-hmm. That SMU match will tell a lot.
Yeah, SMU, by the way, they were earlier this year in the top 25. They dropped out of the top 25. They're not in the top 25 anymore, which is a bummer because they've been a pretty good team in the American for quite some time. Volleyball. The Knights swept their home opening weekend, defeating FIU in 3, Illinois Chicago in 4, and then Wofford in 3 at the UCF Challenge. It was a pretty workmanlike situation for UCF. McKenna Melville was outstanding once again. She was the most outstanding player of the UCF Challenge. UCF had a couple more players take home conference honors, tournament honors again. They have one more conference, I keep saying conference. It's not conference. Non-conference tournament this Friday and Saturday. They play Alabama State at 11 a.m. Friday, Florida Gulf Coast 8 p.m. Friday, and Yale Saturday at 1. I was at all 3 matches, and Coach Dasney was pretty forthright about okay, you just come off that weekend where they lost 2 out of 3 but they did get that win against Southern Cal. Potential for a letdown, but the team was able to take care of business as they should have against opponents that actually will compete in their conference. Here's Coach Dagenais talking about the weekend at the UCF Challenge.
Looking back, I think the biggest thing for us is that our third match of a tournament has always been our most stale match, and I thought this was our best match of the weekend by far. So to come in and have the third match be our best match, that's another step of growth that I keep talking about just a little bit every time here and there. So we want to play teams that are going to win 20 matches, and these teams all have the possibility of being able to do that. I think we played 3 really different styles. I think we if you look at their rosters, and they're all juniors and seniors, they're experienced teams. And you always do worry about a letdown. We didn't have the best week of practice, and I was concerned that maybe we were kind of hitting a little bit of a wall, but I thought we picked it up. Not so much in the first match. It took us a while, and then we pulled away. Second match, I thought we were okay, and then we had one flat set. But today, I thought we were outstanding.
In terms of the development of the team, we really started clicking well, and we had to win ugly at times, but we work through those moments and really stay together as a team and as a unit and keep pushing through.
We've gotten a lot better at our blocking, covering those seams, and covering our setter, making sure she can take the second ball. We're really working on the little things, working and reaching those gaps and stuff, trying to take away more court from the hitters on the other side, so make it easier for our defense. So we're just getting better one step at a time.
All right, so that was Coach Dagenais and also Amber Olson giving us a little bit of insight, and Narissa Moravec as well for UCF. So once again, Volley Nights Invitational coming up Friday with a pair of matches, including an in-state foe in Florida Gulf Coast at 8 p.m. on Friday night, and Yale at 1. Yale should be very competitive in the Ivy League, and Alabama State, too, in their conference as well at 11 a.m. Friday. So, and then it's conference playtime Friday, September 21st at USF, 7 p.m. That's when UCF Volleyball starts the conference slate, Friday, September the 21st. All right. Let's finish. I was going to say, what are we going to do this weekend? But, no North Carolina game. So, what are we going to do? Obviously I'm working volleyball. But, what do you guys have on tap? I don't know.
Murph, what are you going to do? You were planning you were supposed to be in Chapel
Murph was
Hill.
going to go. Not only that, Derek was going to go up to Chapel Hill to take photographs.
Oh, wow.
Which is a bummer.
I feel like Murph's just going to be living this week through Jim Cantori and kind of what if, right?
And Mike Seidel, my people. They're my peeps.
Yeah, throw the Weather Channel on the constant feed. Weather Channel ratings are going up this weekend, boy. I'll tell you that.
Just off of one single Nielsen box, just through the roof.
Hey, that's yeah. It happens. It's the ratings bump is real.
But yeah, I'll tell you this. I will mention this that I've got working on that I will be posting because I want since we've been talking volleyball. Mm-hmm. I've got an exclusive interview in my next feature there of 7 points with Abby Fleener. Abby Fleener, former volleyball player, played 2 years. You could tell the story, transfer from DePaul. Was part of the UCF 2014 American Conference Championship team. They got back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in a while. I got a chance to catch up with Abby Fleener and what she's up to now, which includes now Jeff and Brett Murph. She's now into modeling. She's going to talk about that. In fact, she's right now in the mix trying to be the cover girl for a future Maxim issue. Yeah, so I will have that up there real soon this week. So very interesting to hear her thoughts. I asked her about why she came to UCF. So very interesting. It was good to catch up with her there in that regard. And so I'm working on that. And then possibly I might be having a softball story up there. UCF will be playing in the Puerto Vallarta tournament. That was announced by the tournament this past week or last week, actually, in Mexico. And among the opponents UCF will play there, Washington. Boys, nice. So there'll be a little reunion there with Sydney Ball and Heather Tarr and the Washington staff. And, of course, Jen Sally, who's the volunteer coach at UCF, and Victoria Haywood's the director of ops. They both played at Washington. So that's one of the headlines I'll also write about. Possibly at some point this week. And hopefully I'm hoping to sneak in a Elo Lines edition there. I've got some family stuff I got to take care of, but hope to sneak that in. No, can't make a promise because, hey, maybe I'll get postponed to Florence.
Well, also half the games in the country have been wiped out by this hurricane, like we talked about
that makes it
earlier,
harder to do a column. Yeah, that makes it harder to do a column on that. So I'll be trying to figure something out on that. But nonetheless, the Fleener thing is definitely happening, and that's worth in itself. In fact, you could vote for her now. She actually, if you go, you could vote for her as they're doing the tournaments to see who's going to host, who's going to be a cover girl for Maxim. But we'll get into that in the 7 points.
Cool. I will be working. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm going to be working on one of the things I'm going to be working on actually along those lines is a viewing guide for this week with UCF not playing. What are some of what's going on around the American? What are some of the things that we're going to be paying attention to? Also, outside of the schedule as well, because now we're going to have to pay attention to Boise State as well going forward. Go ahead, Brian.
I just say, Eric, I understand if you can't get the Elo Lines article up, but I need my fix. I need some action. I didn't
say it was. I didn't say it was. I just may not be a full plate. You may have to.
It's a little. Might not be a full entree. Might be heavy appetizers.
Daddy needs a new pair of everything. Here we go. Putting money down.
By the way, one of my picks already ended up on bad beats on Scott Van Pelt. I had FAU.
Oh, that was brilliant, by the way. I
had FAU covering Air Force. And for people that didn't see it, you could probably follow. They had a chance to kind of kill the clock, and Lane Kiffin, for whatever reason, was still throwing the football. And Air Force scored late, so we had a backdoor cover on that. So.
Of course, Lane Kiffin was still throwing the football.
Yes, but I did hit South Florida and Navy. Both were underdogs. I nailed both picks and went outright. So
stone cold lead pipe locks, baby, right there.
Right.
So that's. By the way, I wanted to also extend a huge welcome to Zach Goodall. Zach, if you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, longtime writer for Locked On Jaguars, and he has joined us here at Black and Gold Banneret. He got his first column up this week, and as a film breakdown of Mackenzie Milton and his escapability. So make sure you check that out on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Jeremy Brenner, by the way, he was also planning on heading up to Chapel Hill. He can't. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but. I wanted to extend, tremendous thanks to all the guys that have joined us here since we made the move to SB Nation, and all the support from UCF and UCF-related people who have come on board since then. So, especially Jeremy. We had Luke Saris on our podcast earlier. Obviously, Zach and Chris Carter, UCF Knights Nation, who provides incredible insight for us as well. And our crew is going to keep on growing. We got a lot of stuff that we're actually. Obviously, I talked about. We've talked before many times about Chaz Short, who provided us some insight on Twitter on some of the work that UCF has been doing. In terms of like force majeure clauses and all that having to do with the North Carolina situation. And I'll tell you, it's really been something else to see everyone kind of come on board, and the support of the folks at SB Nation has been remarkable. So I wanted to thank everybody for their help and their good sportsmanship throughout this entire time. So it's been a blast. So, all right, so that will do it for us here on this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. You can follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com, your SB Nation home for UCF athletics. Follow us at UCF_Banneret. You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon. You can follow Eric Lopez at
Eric Lopez Elo.
And follow Brian Murphy at
Spokes_Murphy.
And follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. And subscribe to this podcast if you don't already. And if you don't, I don't know what the hell's the matter with you. On Google Play, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and tune in. Thanks again, boys.
All right, boys, have fun.
So long, Jeffrey.
As the Yankees are getting no hit right now by the Minnesota Twins on a Wednesday night. Thanks again to Brian and Eric. We're going to go back to Brian and I are going to go back to crying into our hands about the Yankee season right now. For all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret, Brian Murphy, Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thanks for listening. And all of you UCF fans and all your family and friends who are in the path of Hurricane Florence, just know that we're thinking about you. Stay safe, batten down the hatches, and we're wishing you all the best as you get through this storm in the southeastern United States. We're all thinking about you and you and yours. So everyone be safe up there across the nation and UCF land, and, of course, of all of our friends with other schools up there in the southeast. And we will keep you posted on the status as the week goes on. For Eric and Brian, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.